university with a friend of mine. Caitlin, thank you so much for joining me here. For those who are watching that don't know you, do you want to introduce yourself and what it is that you do?
Yeah. My name is Caitlin, and I would call myself a community organizer. I started putting on house concerts like 2.5 years ago. And the first one I put on was really just because I wanted to play some music in an intimate setting. And so I put one on in my backyard. And then Raina actually was the first featured artist.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then I met someone there who wanted to host the next one, or like, oh, if you ever want to like do another one, I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna keep doing this until the universe tells me to stop. So yeah, I put on house shows. I've put on like workshops in collaboration like with artists. Over there, the last year, we also started. Me and my friend Rachel started putting on networking events for artists too.
Oh, cool.
For networking, and then also just for like getting to know the other people like in your community. Because I feel like a lot of artists have like their studio and kind of stay in their studio until like they go to markets, but then like even then you're staying like at your booth. And then planned, organized, directed my first art exhibit last summer.
Oh,
Which
cool.
was so dope.
That was in town?
Yeah.
What was that called?
It was called Entangle.
I feel like I walked by it.
It was at Open Space.
I definitely
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that experience like for you?
Oh my God. It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was life-changing. It was like, the house shows are cool, and at this point, they're kind of like, they run themselves a little bit. Like, I don't really have to be there. And that's what they're supposed to do anyway. So, but this was really cool because I feel like we created this like other dimension that you got to like really like enter into temporarily. Have you ever like been to like an immersive exhibit?
A couple times.
Yeah. I had been to one before that called Wonder Spaces down in Southern California. And I just remember the feeling of like being transported, like when you enter into the space, and really wanting that experience for everyone in the community. And then there's so many other different aspects too, like really rewarding themes. Like artists, in order to participate, had to collaborate with one another. So like you couldn't just submit a piece on your own. You had to like work with someone else.
Oh, cool.
And that was cool to see, not only like how creative they got, but also to like see the relationships that formed too. And all the pieces had to reflect community and connection. They had to be interactive. And so it was also really cool to not only see how they made that happen, but also to see everyone who came into the space, how they interacted. And what was cool was like some of the installations, like you kind of required a partner. And so like if you came to the exhibit alone and you tried to interact with the piece, but you needed like a partner to do it. I mean, like someone was always around to kind of like keep an eye out, like me or Rachel or someone else. I forget what the name of the person was called, but yeah. And I made like a really cool friend that way too.
Sick.
How
many artists were involved in that?
There was like around 30.
Oh,
30
wow.
artists. Yeah. And so I think we had like 12 installations. We had 2 workshops, I believe. We had like a film night, and then like a big like spoken word production
Oh,
on
badass.
that. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Was it difficult to coordinate that many people?
A little bit,
Yeah.
but like I think also like for the most part, like they figured it out on their own too. Like I think we all knew it was kind of like this work together and scrap up like what you can kind of process. And yeah, it was just really, really dope. And we're gonna do it again.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
When or is that happening?
It's gonna happen, I think, first weekend in September.
Oh, sick.
I have like a tentative hold at the Hanai Center, just because open space is
No longer?
I think like they're changing owners, but regardless, they're not booking anything this year.
Oh, wow.
So,
I didn't know that.
or that's what I read on the website anyway.
I believe it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a long time for the space to be empty, though. But
Yeah.
what is the Hanai Center? I don't actually know.
So the Hanai Center is like it's this beautiful building on the east side of town, and it's geared towards like community and wellness. So they have like yoga and like breathwork workshops there. They have like open community nights like once a week. You should go check it out because it's like dope. But you go in, and then there's 2 smaller like meditation rooms, and then there's this bigger thing. It's called the forest room. Everything opens up, which is nice. And then they have like a trail system, and like they have like a couple acres.
Oh, cool.
It's like really freaking cool. In town.
Bizarre.
It's like right on the edge of like the east side of town.
Oh, wow.
But I remember going there for the first time for like an open community night, and the vibes are just so calm. And my friend brought me in, and all of a sudden like people were like hugging each other and like, oh, here, put your shoes like in this cubby. Like no one's wearing shoes in the space. There's like this commercial kitchen. You can make yourself some tea.
Oh, wow.
And just like go and like color or like sit on the floor on like a floor pillow. I'm like, okay.
That's awesome. It seems like through all of that, it seems like you're relatively like well connected in town. Is that like, what's the drive behind that?
Behind being connected?
Yeah. Is that a weird question?
No. Well, I feel like the need for community really started right before I put on the house shows, because basically I moved here back in 2019. Me and my ex-husband moved here, and then we moved here for his job. He worked at a church, and so when we moved here, we were immediately involved in the church. Found out I was pregnant very shortly after we moved here, and just like completely wrapped up. And then almost 3 years ago, we left the church for a variety of reasons, but we also like left our faith that way too. When we left, like no one from our church community like reached out, and so it's kind of how it goes, I feel like. And so I was like desperate for community, and I had made like a couple friends like outside of the church, and so when I put on that first house show, like I kind of just like brought everyone that I had together, and then slowly, like after each house show, like just getting to know the people who come through and stuff, and also really putting myself out there, because one of the things that I really wanted to do with the concerts was also incorporate some sort of like other medium of art, and but I didn't really know like the art scene, and I've never been like a full-time artist. Like I had tried to like pursue music like a while ago, but like didn't really know how like being a full-time artist worked. And it was really hard to try and find someone to like get on board, and that's why I'm like so thankful for Raina for really just like getting it started. And yeah, I've not only built like, you know, like this web of like feels like connections I have like in the creative community, but also just like on a personal level, my personal like chosen family is heavily influenced by like these events that I've put on. Like I had one of my closest friends, Maddie Joy, play at like the third house show I put on, and like a couple months later, she and her wife and her kid moved in with us
Cool.
for like a couple months because their bus had mold in it. And now they're like family to me. And yeah, it's like just like another reason why I'm just like really grateful for like these events and like these temporary spaces.
Yeah, it makes sense, and it's fascinating because I was going to this one last night. Not only the intentionality that you bring to it, but also, or I guess a piece of intentionality of like incorporating like mixed mediums. Like there's so many house shows that I've been to. I've lived in a bunch of different places.
Right.
That it's you show up and like 2 bands play,
right,
and that's it.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to have this like mixed medium where you had Olga Press, like the publisher, followed by the poet. What was their
Melissa.
name? Melissa.
Yeah.
Which is we connected a little bit because I used to
Cool.
do some slam poetry, and
Sweet.
it was you mentioned a couple of like the slam poetry trauma bonding situation, which was really funny. Yeah, and then followed up with some music. Was that? I guess you were speaking to a little bit, but was that your original intention in doing it, and like why the mixed mediums?
I don't know. I think so I grew up like in Southern California in San Diego, and started playing music, like playing out like in high school, and then started doing house shows. And we also played at like makers markets and stuff, and so like the combination between the two and really seeing how people like express themselves, like it's one and the same. And so I think I just like was like, oh, it'd be cool if we also like had like art, but also still making it intentional, because one of the core values about like the house shows that I put on is to make sure that there's like an intentional listening audience, because I hate playing gigs. Like I hate being background music, because that's not what my music, and it's not why I play music. I don't play to like, there's nothing wrong with playing to entertain, nothing wrong with like playing to like make a living and stuff, and like that's enjoyable for a lot of like musicians, but like the music that I write feels vulnerable. And so like when you're standing up there and like you're being vulnerable and like people are just there to like eat and like talk and stuff, it just doesn't feel great.
No, it makes sense. It's so funny the amount of musicians that I've talked to where they are playing full time for it, and having sat in their houses, you know, and we're like late night hangouts, like just them and their guitar, and like listening to the lyrics or seeing them develop a song is so incredibly different than being background music where maybe a couple people are paying attention. And so to me, it's really fascinating and really cool that you're building that space. And you read something at the beginning of last night, kind of like reminding people to come back to that intention. God, it's just so beautiful. Do you think that that's felt and seen by all the musicians who come and artists who come through?
I do. Yeah, I try to get feedback so that like I can do better. And yeah, I don't think I've had one person be like, oh, that was awful, or like that wasn't intentional. Like I think everybody sees like just the intentionality behind it.
It seems like there's a fair amount of like good marketing that goes into it too, where it's like everyone who goes walks away like knowing the space, and it's cultivated and strong enough where even if you weren't there,
right,
like it's a like someone's hosting it at their own house, right? Like 1 to 2 mics, you know, small PA system, this whole situation. So it's just really cool to have experienced it and to kind of understand that. and that like some people want to play party music, and that's a
Right.
different scene.
Right. Exactly.
It's just cool to make like that pocket, especially for maybe like developing artists. Do you think a lot of people that come through, like, who do you reach out to bring in?
Definitely emerging people who aren't playing out a bunch. It's interesting though, because each show is kind of different. It feels, I don't know the last show you went to, but like it feels like every show kind of has their own personality. Like you had mentioned like the small like cozy setting. Like I would say that's maybe like 75% of the shows is like really cozy, really quiet and stuff. And then there's like the other 25%, usually in the summers, where it's like bands in the backyard and like more family friendly, like bring the kids. Like the background noise is okay. The kid noise is okay.
Totally.
Some bands come in and are like, we want you to dance. Like, let's do that. I'm not gonna say no. Like, it's the togetherness that I think is like what's important.
Yeah.
And so going back to your question, like what kind of bands and like musicians play, I feel like I do try to, as like a femme presenting like person and musician, like I definitely have like a bias to like give femme and like queer people that platform. People of color, really just trying to like provide opportunities for people who haven't had it yet. And then, people who are playing a lot, also sprinkling them in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's cool in this town because I like starting with photography, like in the music industry here. It's wild how many different bands there are and how many people fall into that category. So it's because it's once a month pretty much. And I know you mentioned that it kind of takes care of itself, and that to me isn't surprising because there's such a high like just amount of people that are trying to create in this town for some reason.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just feels so beautiful to like have spaces. And I guess maybe a little bit of a pivot, but can you speak to like the name that you gave it and maybe how I know a little bit about it, but kind of how you came to it and what it means?
Yeah. So I remember putting on the first house show, and it just was house show. Here's the address, here's the time. But then as I kept doing them, I was like, I think I need to call it something else. And at the time, my friend Eric was doing something called Whippoorwill.
Oh, I love Eric.
Yeah, Eric's
totally.
dope. Yeah. But he stopped doing it recently. And he would put on these really intimate shows. He was the only other guy doing it, really. Whippoorwill Presents. And so then he had his like own tie to that name, but in my head I was like, okay, I think I need to like brand it kind of thing. And tried to kind of just like line up, okay, well, what is the mission here? What's the goal? And it's community. It's bringing people together through art and through music. Also knowing and witnessing that like everyone who shows up that night is supposed to be there. Like that's something that's so apparent to me and is what makes the event successful in itself. Doesn't matter how many people show up, it's knowing and witnessing the interactions and like connections that happen. It's like, oh, that was supposed to happen. And so I think I was just like Googling, and at the time, was really obsessed with the Evermore album and Taylor Swift.
Epic.
Yeah.
Come on now. Yeah.
Invisible String was one of the songs. And was looking into that theory, I guess, or like idea. Like, what is that? The Chinese proverb. and just really resonated with, and yeah, kind of just ran with it a little bit.
Yeah, and for those that don't know the proverb, do you want to maybe like tell the story?
Yeah, so it goes something along the lines of like, there's a string that connects people who are destined to meet, regardless of time, place, circumstance. The string may tangle or stretch, but it will never break. Like, you're forever tied to someone that you cross paths with. And I think that, like, we were, I don't know, part of me feels like maybe we were always connected, kind of thing. And so, yeah.
No, it's really cool. And it seems like it does, it's funny when you find a name for something that makes so much sense. It almost is in that like thread of like you were meant in some way to find that name. Because when you're talking about it, right, where it's like this community oriented aspect and that everyone is already connected is in essence what you're trying to create. It's almost giving it like the conduit for people to gather so that, you know, X artist can meet this other person and this thing can be like built from it. Yeah, that's so damn beautiful. Yeah, that gets so, I get really I guess like nerdy about that, where it's like I don't know, or some people come into your life and it just like makes sense or something like this, or like when a name name for an event, it happens and then it all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's like a puzzle piece fitting in. It's funny. This is a weird, strange aside, but we used to build. I grew up in kind of I grew up on some land in Connecticut. Okay. I guess this is a nice way to put it, but we build like rock walls basically. And it was weird. My dad always used to say that the rocks sound different when you find a spot for them that like is balanced and settled. And it's really strange because it is like the sound of a rock like fitting in a place is like a deeper like thump almost. And I just think of that of like things finding their place in life and like clicking. And now it's been 2 years and the name still makes sense because it's connected to those values. Yeah, I just think it's really cool. And I guess the piece of that intrigues me is like the intentionality behind all of that. Do you find that level of like conscientiousness is like a part of your life, or are there like things you cultivate in that?
It feels natural. It doesn't really feel like an effort. And I think that's just because I feel like I am a pretty like big feeler. Not necessarily like an emotional sense, but more so just like kind of just like caring, in like a fiery kind of way.
What do you mean by that?
I guess like the difference between like caring in like a watery kind of way and a fiery kind of way, where like they're both important, but the difference I think is that the water might be more emotional and maybe the fire is more temperamental. But I think also like just really feeling passionate about like providing opportunity for artists, also providing opportunities for safer gatherings for people. That's become increasingly more clear to me, that is also what is being provided and what needs to be provided. Which should kind of be the bare minimum.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Is there like, I think it takes a lot of courage to care. Yeah. Full statement. have there been like people that have either like been able to open that up for you? Have you always been open to it, or like have you always cared, or are there things that have kind of led you down that path?
Yeah, I mean, I think being challenged has definitely helped me like care more, because I think for a long time I was kind of pretty we're always learning, you know, and we're always being challenged. I think then it's like how you respond to that challenge is like going to decide if like in what direction you're growing. Yeah, I think like conversations with like over the years with like artists and musicians over like what the need is, what is being like what's important, also like what happened at the show that was like appreciated, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then on a personal level, kind of just like experiencing life and a lot of self-discovery and wondering and implementing the ways I can, I guess, use this platform to also like help me feel safe and supported and like held and stuff. And I feel that.
That makes sense. And it's been so just over 2 years, is that right?
It's been about 2.5 years. I started in the summer of 2022. So yeah, it'll be 3 years this summer.
Cool. What like keeps you, I guess, because to some degree you say kind of takes care of itself, but there's always a piece of you that's going to be a part of it. What keeps you like motivated to like keep showing up for it?
Yeah, there are definitely times where I'm just like, I'm burnt out. I take a break like in November and December. I also am like kind of like the type of person who needs to be working towards something. So like the house shows aren't really changing too much. Like they have the formula. Like it's there and they can run themselves. Something like the exhibit, the art exhibit last year, that was an avenue or like an outlet, creative outlet for me. Writing an album, recording an album is like an outlet for me. And so like, as long as I'm, I feel like I'm still like being able to express myself like in a creative way, it helps me stay motivated to be able to provide those creative opportunities for other people. I also think that like it's been growing since like day one, and it's not gonna stop. I mean, maybe it'll stop growing. I kind of resonated with Rob last night when they were like, oh, I'm just gonna keep doing this until it doesn't feel like I'm supposed to be doing it anymore. Like that's definitely how I feel about this, but I'm a dreamer. So I'm just gonna keep dreaming. And like also just like down to collaborate with like other people too.
Yeah.
And so I'm just gonna keep doing that because I have to, or I go crazy.
So real. Yeah. Do you have like an ultimate vision? That's a weird question, but kind of like an ideal version of what you want it to look like, or what doors it opens for you, or anything like this?
Yes.
Yeah.
One day, and I've wanted this since like graduating high school, because dropped out of college pretty soon. I want a space. I want a physical venue. And I want to be able to put on events at the venue. Early on, like this dream also looked like it's a gathering space, and I'm like, well, how do I get people in the door? And I'm like, okay, maybe it's like half coffee shop or something. I'm not sure what it looks like yet because I'm not super passionate about coffee. And so I would need someone to be like, I'm gonna take that on. But yeah, it looks like a physical space, I think.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's like, well, this town is missing a tea house.
Yeah,
so,
you're right.
Just gonna put a plug out there if anyone wants to make that investment. I've been in a bunch of cities and every place has a really good tea house, you know, and so this is my personal like injection of like, ooh, maybe it's not coffee, but maybe it's tea.
We used to have a tea house. God, what was it called? It was a place in Portland too. I can't remember.
I think it was downtown. It was downtown, right? Something like this. Mm-hmm. I heard it closed during COVID.
It did. You're right.
Something like that. It's funny. I've had a couple conversations recently, and I'm just trying to speak about it enough because I'm like, someone's gonna hear something I say.
Yeah.
Because I'm not the one that's gonna have the tea house. I don't think. I totally would, but I don't think. And so anything like that, I'm like, coffee's great, but have you considered tea?
Yeah, tea.
That's really cool. So a physical location and to be able to do it, would you want that to be like the full-time work?
Yeah, I think so.
Epic. How have you balanced, like, because that's not currently full-time for you, art. How has the balance been for you between work and creative and hosting spaces and stuff like this?
It's so hard. It's so hard because, like, I'm also the kind of person who, like, I can't do a 9 to 5. Like, it is impossible for me to be mentally stable and work a 9 to 5 job. Like, I just can't. So, I was a stay-at-home mom for a while, really until this last year. I work at, have you ever been to the Workhouse?
I haven't, no.
Oh my God, it's beautiful. It's an amazing space. The owner's Carrie and Christian, started it years ago. I'm actually not sure how old this place is, but it's right over by Cafe de Chutes. So I work 2 part-time jobs right now. And what's hard about that is you can't pay your mortgage and work 2 jobs, apparently. And that's kind of been a little bit disheartening, really just like over the last couple months, because I am in the middle of a divorce and my parents moved in with me in October. And so in my head, I'm kind of like making like a rough plan of like, okay, like I'll get back on my feet in however many years. But just looking at what I would have to do, how much of like my life I would have to like compromise, just kind of doesn't feel sustainable for me. And so yeah, ideally this would become like a full-time thing and not only be able to like pay myself, but like also be able to like pay the artists, pay whoever's like employed at the space or whatever, or if there is a space one day. But yeah, I think at this point I'm like, I don't think I could ever live alone financially, which is like kind of a bummer. But also like I don't love living alone anyway. Like living in community is actually like my ideal sweet spot. And I don't think I'll have to, because I think that my good friends are gonna move in like a couple years. We're just gonna raise our kids together and it'll be great.
Absolutely. Well, then you speak to something that's so true, which is, and I can't speak to other places because I've lived in Bend for a couple years now, but it is wild, like the housing costs, especially in like mortgage and rates. It does make like the average or even like above average like worker at like a in-person in-town job, especially anywhere in the service industry, I mean, it's wild how much money goes towards mortgage and rent, depending on it. And it's funny because I shoot a lot of real estate, and I'll talk to agents all the time, and I'll ask them on site, be like, oh, this property is like, it's like, I think the median household price right now, or house price, is like 800K around in Bend. And then talking about the mortgage, and I don't know, I try to stay relatively up to date, but I mean, it's crazy. And so it does make an interesting question. And this is something that why I'm a full-time videographer now, was I asked this question because I was like Ben's worst bartender and self-proclaimed. And then I was a barista and like all this stuff. And similarly, just like it didn't click for me. And it was super exhausting and draining. Actually, Raina and I talked about this quite a bit, which is that it's maybe a type of personality when there's so much maybe energy or care going towards something that either you don't own or don't have a level of control over, that feels like very exhausting. And I think a lot of service industry jobs can be like that, although there's tons of people that I know that like really do enjoy that work. And I guess it became this question of like, how do you get from here, a job that pays, minimum wage plus tips, or even like 18-20 an hour, which is still relatively unlivable in this town.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's wild when you say that, because it's like, we're not in New York, we're in like a small-ish town in Oregon.
Yeah.
Very weird. But the jump that you have to make is probably close to like $10 or $15 an hour to be able to be like sustainable. And so that to me becomes the question of like, well, what's the pieces that are like missing, or like what would need to change in order to make it more feasible? And do you have like any ideas of what that is for you, like in that shift?
So can you clarify?
Yeah, totally. I was talking, I was like, that's pretty confusing. I've thought about it so much that it makes sense. So it's saying like, what is the like barrier between where you are now and where you want to be?
Well, I think time is one of them. Like, I have a 4-year-old, and so like wanting to spend as much time with him as possible. Also just like being mindful of this transition in life and trying to be gentle with the pace that I'm going with, like being okay with like the pace. I think what would need to happen is really deciding like how I want to move forward, because I'm at this crossroads a little bit of like, I'm not registered as an LLC or a nonprofit. I don't have experience with anything business. And so it kind of feels like a decision needs to be made pretty soon. If I want this to be like my full-time thing, then I do have to compromise some other things. I was just having a conversation with a friend before this about just like, she's run a nonprofit out of LA for the last like 10-ish years. And we were talking about a music festival we want to put on, and just like how we want there to be like musicians are being paid because we're commissioning them to come play at the festival. But then we also want artists setting up their booths. And so we were talking about an application process, and I was like, I don't want to put an application fee because I don't want to charge artists. And so she was kind of pointing out, she was like, look, you need to go with your gut, and like whatever your values are, like you need to stay with them. Down the road, if you keep doing things this way, it's not going to be sustainable. And if you're worried about not being for the artist, just realizing that like you're providing the space, all the marketing for this event. The people who are coming to this event are coming because you're marketing it, coming for the music, probably for the art too. If you have like a vendor fee of like $25 and they get to keep 100% of like what they sell, like that's one thing. It becomes predatory like when you're charging $100 to $300 for a vendor fee. Like that's when it's like ridiculous.
Right.
That's when you're taking advantage of the artist. And so it's hard though to kind of like put value into like what I'm doing, because in my head I'm like, y'all could do this.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
you can put on a house show. Like I make the flyers, I put the word out, try to get snacks and drinks and stuff. But like at the end of the day, you're just hosting. Like you don't need a PA system. You really just need to like gather people.
Yeah. It's funny because as soon as you said that, I was like, oh man, like someone told me a couple weeks ago, really cool dude, also down in LA actually, and he was like, yes, because I do a lot of stuff also that theoretically anyone can do.
Right.
And like, especially with photo and stuff, if I handed you my camera with my settings and I said, stand here, like it would be your photo.
Right.
And it would be damn near, like pretty damn good, right?
Yeah.
It might not be exactly what I take, but his whole point was like, told me the story and he was like, but there's no one that's going to do it the way that you do it. And I think that, at least in my experience with the ones that I've been to, I do think there's something that maybe someone would get pretty damn close. And there's this inherent, like, organic, individual thing that, like, you specifically bring to it that makes it what it is and, like, what it will be. And so it's an interesting, like, balance, right? Where it's saying, like, well, anyone can do this because of XYZ. And you're, I think, the only... I might be wrong, but I think, or at least one of the only ones that are doing it in that same style in town, right?
For like,
as far as like
music and like other art mediums.
Yeah. And so for me, as like from the business side of things, I'm like, wait, that's actually so cool, right? Because there isn't like, competition is good, but there's something that like this town is needing, and the fact that it's been sustained for 2 years, like is no small feat. You know, I guess so. That's just like a perspective where like it's like, because I run into that all the time too, where it's like the self-doubt of like, man, like literally anyone could do this, you know, but no one can do it in the way that you would do it. And I've just been trying to hold on to that as an anchor of like whatever it becomes, like no one else would make it what it is if you weren't a part of it, you know. But it's really interesting, the like extension of that when you're speaking about like also like what is the balance between building a space that empowers artists versus this concept of like taking advantage of them as far as like fees goes. And that to me is like a fascinating and deep conversation because it's all based on philosophy, and the standard like that I've seen seems to be set relatively low, where it's like almost normalized for high vendor fees and stuff like this, or like, yeah. Do you have anything to say like on that front of it?
The high vendor fees?
Yeah, or like where the like philosophies come from or why it's been normalized?
I don't know, because I've never put on those kinds of events. The only thing I can imagine is like when you're putting, like, let's say like Summerfest, you're putting on like a big event like that, there are lots of hoops that you have to jump through, lots of permits that you have to pay for, all of their like sound, like they put on that big stage, they have to pay for that somehow, and so I would imagine if they're not getting funded with grants, then they need to like bring in the money elsewhere, and that's where the sponsors come in. That's where the high vendor fees come in. I also don't know what it's like to be an artist selling there. I don't know if they get a percentage, like if whoever puts it on gets a percentage, or if the artists get to keep like all of it, kind of thing. Yeah, that's hard to figure out when me and my friend are talking about planning this small festival, like a one-day festival. The only things that we really need to worry about paying for, because it's going to be considered a block party, is sound system. And I think I have that covered.
We can make it happen.
Yeah. And then like time, you know, the time that like we're putting in to make the flyers and marketing materials, like physical flyers. Day of events, like set up, tear down, like really planning, organizing, just it is a skill. It is. But yeah, as far as like things that you need to run the event, I guess it depends on the scale of event, and then I guess then would really depend on how much you're paying for.
And like where you are and all of this stuff. Yeah, Bend seems very interesting when it comes to permits and stuff like that too, from what I've like heard and seen.
Yeah.
For this like block party concept, or like single day festival, do you have a time in mind when that's gonna happen or hoping for?
Yeah. The festival, I think, we're tentatively planning on the first Saturday in May.
Cool.
So I think that'll just be like an all-day thing, and it'll be Porch Fest. So just use the front porches, and I want 3 stages. It's on this like dead end street, like in downtown, and yeah.
I love a good porch hang.
Yeah.
that's great. Again, a really great name for it.
And it's not original. Like there are other things happen. Like Porch Fest is like a thing.
Oh, is it really?
I think, yeah. Like
it's a really good name. So I would be like, there's some times where it's the first person to come up with something and you're like, how has no one done that before?
Yeah. No, I think I remember Googling it and been like, oh, there's other people doing Porch Fest. Yeah.
That's what's up. Sweet. So May, sometime in May.
Yeah.
That's what's up. How many artists are you hoping to bring in for that?
I really want to line the street. So like maybe like 20 to 30.
Epic.
20 to 30 artists. And then like, I think around like 15 or 20 musicians just like throughout the day. They can just like 40-minute sets and then, 20-minute tear down setup kind of thing in between like each set.
Sick. Yeah. Oh, that's gonna be so fun.
Yeah.
I hope that I can come to that.
Yeah.
That'd be so beautiful.
Yeah.
Is it, I guess a big piece of that seems like the way that it's really interesting having 2 years of like the Invisible Thread events, or 2.5, plus all of the things that you've been doing with the community. It seems like you're pretty uniquely positioned also to have the connections to like make that happen.
I guess. I think I'm just like, the person that I'm working with, like, I think she followed me on Instagram, and then I realized, like, her nonprofit also followed me, and I looked into the nonprofit, and I was like, oh my god, this is so cool. And so then I followed both of them back, and then she was looking for a dog sitter, and I was like, I'm getting a divorce. I would love to get out of my house for a couple weeks. And that's how I met her. And there are a lot of just like interesting ways that I've like made connections, but I do think I'm being intentional about it, but not in like a have to make this connection here and here kind of thing.
You're saying, and like, and then that way it is like organic. Like,
yes,
and maybe you can speak to this. 2.5 years ago when you did your first house show,
right?
Did you think about doing a single day festival called Porch Fest, right?
No, but that same year, I started in that summer, and then the following spring, as I was getting to know the visual artists, in my head I was like, what if y'all just like, because everyone keeps complaining that they don't know other artists, what if I put on this like art exhibit and you guys had to work together to like make something to put like in the exhibit. And that's how Entangle was like kind of formed. Started this like little idea, and then kind of put on the back burner. So I'm like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. And then I met Rachel, and she was like, I'm on board. And I'm like, okay, bet, let's do this. And that's kind of how we started that one. It's funny because I used to be very like, how do I start a business? How do people do it? Like I would be really intrigued and like try to like listen to people's stories and like sit down with people I admired who like had started sweet coffee shops / thrift stores, or I don't know, random venues and stuff, that I was just like, how did you do this? And 9 out of 10 times people just say, I just went for it, kind of thing. And I just like didn't understand. I'm like, but how? Like I need a step-by-step plan. And I think you just kind of do the next thing that kind of like presents itself, but you do it, kind of thing. Even when it's kind of scary.
Absolutely. I think of like, it's kind of like jumping off a cliff, right? And it's like, a weird metaphor is like, there's water, maybe you can't see it, and then like you hope it works out. And when it does, it's like a really cool positive feedback loop of like, oh wait, like when the first house show goes well, right? You're like, huh, people did have a good time.
Yeah.
Right? And then the second, and then it kind of builds on itself. But are there any, I guess like strategies you use to like push into taking those steps? I guess like personally, in like when you face like that adversity or like the kind of friction.
Like friction just with like the planning aspect, or like friction with like people?
Either.
Yeah. So I think like what's coming to mind is like when we were planning for Entangle, I did not know how we were gonna pay for the venue. Like we had put a hold on it and like it was happening. I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna hope people show up and like hope I'm not out $1,500 by the end of this. Damn. Like it was so scary. But I do have a firm belief, because of like what I've experienced, that like everything does work out. We were able to get 1,000 of it covered, or maybe it was the whole 1,500. From have you heard of the Casey Anseth Legacy Foundation?
I don't. I'm learning so much today.
Oh my god, It's such a dope foundation.
In town?
In town.
Cool.
Yeah, they're an organization for artists, and they give out grants throughout the year. The application process is next to nothing. Like you don't have to prove why you need the grant. Wow. It's kind of just like, you're an artist, you need the grant, kind of thing.
Cool. Yeah.
They were able to help us get funding for the venue. And that was nice, because then we were able to reimburse the artists for like the supplies they had used, and also pay ourselves.
Wow.
For 9 months of planning an event.
Totally, yeah. It's one of those where you like don't calculate the hourly. Don't do it.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, it's fascinating though. It seems like you have like a relatively high, at least for those kinds of things, like the risk tolerance to take on, like even 15.
I do.
What is that from? Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm really just like, I think I've always been this way. I'm just like, like whatever happens, happens. Yeah, and I know for some people, like it definitely freaks them out, especially people who like need a plan, kind of thing. And yeah, I think I really am like, it can feel irresponsible at times. But yeah, I don't know. I do really feel like it will work out.
Absolutely. Have you ever had, it's because I feel so similar. I made choices that some people would look at and be like,
yeah.
Really? Like, whoa. Has there ever been something that you've taken a chance on, hasn't worked out? And like, what was your response to that?
I mean, I can look at my divorce that way. I was with him for 10 years and like really thought that like it was going to work out, and it didn't work out. And that was devastating. And also, like, now that I'm here and it's been like 9 months, like, I can see that, like, even though, like, that grief is going to be with me forever kind of thing, I know in the end, like, it's what we both needed. And, like, works out in a different way. Like, even when shows have to get canceled or postponed, or a musician backs out last minute, there's obviously like this anxiety and panic because it's like, it's not running the way I thought I was gonna do. Like, but then, like, kind of like what I said, like, I used to get really stressed over turnout. And there was this one show where it really just hit me. A musician had backed out because she got COVID like the night before. And then the turnout was so low. But this woman came, and we were actually hosting it at the Desert Rose Cactus Lounge. This woman came, and she's just standing in the doorway, and I told her, you can come in. And she's like, oh, I don't have any money. I'm like, you don't have to pay the admission fee. You can just come in. We have tea. Like, there's a chair. You can sit down. And she just started talking to me about how her daughter was incarcerated and, like, how life was really hard right now. And I just kind of, like, really felt like, wow, like, I'm really glad that I met you tonight. I'm really glad that you came tonight. And that I know you were supposed to be here tonight. And, like, that for me kind of just made everything else, like, seem so unimportant.
Yeah, it seems like that to such a degree with the way that we relate to like external validation and expectation, that it's almost like the philosophical like return to like what actually matters. And I don't know, I think that's so significant because in that perspective change, or even letting yourself experience it and being open in that moment to her story, I think that it's really interesting because I see a lot of artists, because we talk about like, or I talk with a lot of people about like writer's block, creative block, or like not going and doing the thing. And it's interesting because it seems like there's a theme with people I've talked to recently, including yourself, where it's to allow that expectation to shift and then still have the openness for that to be what's significant in that night. Seems incredibly powerful. In also being able to continue pushing through, where it's kind of saying it's not about a number of people or like an amount of money made, but about like, is someone actually benefiting from this experience, no matter if it's like one person or a ton.
You just reminded me I was having a really hard time last night. And my friend brought up this poem. It's called The Invitation. Do you know it?
It's one of my favorite poems. Yeah.
This reminds me of that poem that she read to me last night.
A high school teacher of mine, Melissa Schomer, showed this to me many years ago.
Really? Yeah.
If you want to share it too for people who haven't.
Yeah. It doesn't interest me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for, and if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing. It doesn't interest me how old you are. I want to know if you will risk looking like a fool for love, for your dream, for the adventure of being alive. It doesn't interest me what planets are squaring your moon. I want to know if you have touched the center of your own sorrow, if you have been opened up by life's betrayals, or have become shriveled and closed from fear or further pain. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving, to hide it or fade it or fix it. I want to know if you can be with joy, mine or your own, if you can dance with wildness and let the ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers and toes. Without cautioning us to be careful, be realistic, to remember the limitations of being human. It doesn't interest me if the story you are telling me is true. I want to know if you can disappoint another to be true to yourself, if you can bear the accusation of betrayal and not betray your own soul. I want to know if you can be faithless and therefore be trustworthy. I want to know if you can see beauty even when it is not pretty every day, and if you can source your own life from its presence. I want to know if you can live without failure, yours and mine, and still stand on the edge of a lake and shout to the sliver of the full moon, yes. It doesn't interest me to know where you live or how much money you have. I want to know if you can get up after the night of grief and despair, weary and bruised to the bone, and do what needs to be done for the children. It doesn't interest me who you are, how you came to be here. I want to know if you will stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. It doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you have studied. I want to know what sustains you from the inside when all else falls away. I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in the empty moments. Yeah.
Yeah, that one, every time it hits me so deeply. Yeah, and I think it's every time I hear it, I'm reminded, because I've known about this since I was 16.
Oh, wow.
I'm 27 now. And the wildest piece, it always comes back to this question of like, do you have the courage to like do what it takes to live in integrity?
Mm-hmm. Authentically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. The more I pay attention to things, the less easy that feels in some moments, but the more important it is, I guess. Yeah,
it's so important.
I would argue that it's maybe everything.
I would totally side with you in that argument.
Hell yeah. I hope no one disagrees with that. I mean, like, yeah, that's like my like ultimate how I define success is like living with integrity. Yeah, it sounds like that resonates for you too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh man, wow. Is there anything that we haven't talked about? Oh man, and we didn't even get to talk about, I wanted to ask a couple questions about your personal music.
Oh yeah.
But if you want to talk a little bit about that, or if you have anything that you really want to talk about, or anything like that, yeah, now would be the time.
Yeah. I feel like you touched on everything.
Cool.
So.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I have been writing for as long as I can remember. I feel like I started like writing poetry, and then growing up around music. My dad's side of the family all plays music. My grandparents lived with me off and on. My grandpa plays and records music, and so I remember writing some of my first songs with him. Then started going to open mics, played all my talent shows. And I wrote and recorded my first album in 2016. And then my second album came out in 2018 or 2019. And there has been so much transition between then and now. And I feel like for me, writing is a form of release. form of process, and it's such a powerful creative outlet for me. And yeah, I'm gonna be able to record with one of my friends from San Diego in just a couple weeks here.
Epic.
We have a bus on my property that we're gonna record in. So,
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so I'm pretty stoked for that. And then I don't play out a ton, but when I do, I try to make sure that it's like pretty intentional. So I am gonna play like one of the house shows I put on with my friend who's gonna be up from San Diego that same weekend.
Cool.
In April. So I'm really, really excited for that.
Oh, that's so badass. And that's gonna be, how many, do you have the amount of songs, or?
I think it's gonna be 12 tracks.
Cool.
Yeah.
Damn. Which is no small feat.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like the themes are really like deconstructing my faith, and then like processing all the grief and transformation that's happened with my divorce, and self-discovery, really coming to terms with like my gender identity and sexuality, and yeah, I'm just really excited to just like get it recorded and out.
Beautiful. Yeah. Oh, I'm excited to listen to it. Do you, as far as like artist name,
Yeah.
what is it gonna be under?
So it'll be under Sisu, Sisu, which is a Finnish word, really Finnish concept, that is kind of like this resilience in hardship kind of thing. I had read this book called The Finnish Way. My aunt had recommended it. She started reading it because my great-grandpa had immigrated here from Finland. And so my uncle started getting really into like our ancestry stuff, and we got this book and talked about this concept, and I was like really resonated with me because of just like all the shit I was going through, and feeling like that line in the invitation where it's like you get up from the darkest night and you do what needs to be done for the children. Like you have to keep going. Like I don't have any other choice.
Right. There is no other option.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it's definitely like when I was reading the book, and she's kind of just like, you know, kind of like studying the way that like the Finns kind of like live their life. It's kind of like you just do what God, you know, like there's no complaining. You just got to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you got to do things that are like good for you. Like they'll go on their lunch breaks and they'll go out for cold plunges and saunas. Like because you have to.
It's fascinating because it's something that you have to because it's good for you, and it's also maybe something that you want to do.
Yeah.
And it's interesting the level. I think a lot of that in my mind, I'm like, oh, it's fascinating because it comes down to consistency, because it's not something that you always want to do, but it's something that at the end of the day, if you didn't do, it's one of those where you're like, damn, I probably should have gone and done that.
Yeah. And in my case, where it's like sometimes I wake up and I don't always want to be a parent for a 4-year-old.
Totally.
But I have to. And it's so important to also like try your best every day. Even if your best doesn't always look the same.
Absolutely. And then you always find a way too. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's incredible. I could go into so many more hours of this conversation. It's wild. I guess is there anything, I guess maybe that you would want, I guess this is an interesting one. Is there anything that you wish that someone had told you that you would want to tell other people that are listening?
that I wish someone had told me.
Yeah.
Or someone maybe did tell me.
Or they did. Yeah.
Well, I think I remember in the beginning feeling like, okay, I have this platform. I have to make sure like I'm using the platform wisely. I'm on my best behavior, like blah, 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 kind of thing. And I remember having a conversation with an artist who had a very strong opinion about how I should be using the platform. And I remember then kind of talking to one of my good friends about it. And she kind of just reminded me that like I need to remember who I am. Because I do. Like I know who I am. I know like my character. I know what my values are. And to continue to reflect that however I see fit, like on the platform. I think things are changing because people are moving away from social media. I'm trying to move away from social media, but I think from then on, I was just like, okay, like I have to be not just intentional, but I have to be bold too, which can be scary sometimes. Because I think at first I was like, everyone is welcome to these things. And yes, everyone is welcome. But also, there are things, there's like hate is not going to be tolerated. Like you're not welcome. You're gonna, yeah, if there's any sort of hate there. But yeah, just like remembering that like people's opinions, maybe people also have like different experiences. Those experiences are valid, but don't necessarily reflect you and your character. And it's hard when you're put in this position, this leadership position, and you're kind of like the face of the thing. But I also think Invisible Thread has like taken on, like I don't think I'm necessarily like, I am not Invisible Thread. Invisible Thread is its own entity. I think she's a woman and she's really powerful. She's definitely go with the flow. And she's kind of just like, it's gonna work out.
Epic. It's badass. Absolutely. And it's all of that, I think, comes back to that point of like, if you know who you are, you build things that are in line with your values. And there's no opportunity great enough to sacrifice values for, or to like shift your boundaries. And so all of that, yeah, makes sense to me. And I don't know, I find beautiful in so many ways. Yeah. And you see it with like what Invisible Threads as its own entity now exist as. So yeah, I'm stoked and grateful for you to have put the energy and time into creating that platform and seeing like how, even just in last night, how meaningful a space like that can be for artists. So yeah, it's just really beautiful. Yeah. Last piece of this is asking a question that the previous person came on wrote. This is a 2-part question.
Okay.
The first one's great, and so is the second one. The first question is a chocolate chip cookie better than an oatmeal cookie? And explain your reasoning.
Yes. Hold on. Is the oatmeal cookie just oatmeal, or is it oatmeal chocolate chip?
It says oatmeal, so I think it's just. I think it's just oatmeal, but does it change if it's oatmeal chocolate chip?
I think so.
Whoa.
Yeah. Because I don't just want an oatmeal cookie. Like, if I'm gonna have a cookie, like, I want chocolate chips in there.
That makes sense. So you would take a...
I want a dessert.
Absolutely. So if it's just oatmeal, chocolate chip's better. But if it's oatmeal chocolate chip,
Yes.
why?
Life hack. Throw those suckers in the freezer and just eat them frozen. Because
Really?
they're so good.
I've never done that before.
Yeah.
I'm totally gonna try that out. Oh,
Peanut
man.
butter oatmeal chocolate chip? Another game changer.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I don't make much, but I'm sure might. For peanut butter oatmeal chocolate chip.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a recipe?
No, but we could make one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I kind of want a chocolate chip cookie now.
Okay.
Specifically an oatmeal peanut butter chocolate chip cookie. The second question is a larger one. To you, like, what is the meaning of the universe?
I guess it depends on how you define the universe. If you're defining the universe as like the infinite whatever it is that's out there, then like that's what it is. I think it's infinite, but there's this cool it's just like a short, I don't want to call it a documentary, but maybe it's a documentary. It's called Trip to Infinity. It's so interesting.
What's it about? I don't
It's
know.
about the concept of infinity. Like, and is the universe infinite? Is anything actually infinite? And like, it's wild. It's wild. It's really cool. I kind of like, when I refer to the universe, I kind of like, I think it's like God or like the source, or, you know, however you're identifying this. I feel like I usually refer it to as like the source. I think it's like light. I think it's unconditional love. And yeah, I think that's it. And I think we're all a part of it.
Epic. Yeah, I can dig that. That's what's up.
Yeah.
So Caitlin, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming in and seeing the cameras and to me.
Thank you.
And, yeah, I'm really excited for it. I'll link the websites. People can join the mailing list for Invisible Threads.
Sweet.
And then I'd be stoked to promote the Porch Fest when it comes up too.
Cool.
So hell yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
I received a friend of mine.